The neon sign of the Desert Rose Café flickered like a dying heartbeat against the twilight sky, casting erratic shadows across the cracked asphalt parking lot. Inside, the air hung heavy with the scent of sizzling burgers and stale coffee, the kind of place where truckers nursed their regrets and locals whispered about better days. It was just past closing on a humid evening in the forgotten stretch of highway between nowhere and regret when the door swung open with a weary chime. In stumbled a lone figure, broad-shouldered and weathered, his leather jacket scarred from roads long traveled. Jacob Harlan, a man whose eyes carried the weight of promises broken by time, slid onto a stool at the counter. His hands, calloused from gripping handlebars through storms and solitude, trembled slightly as he ordered a simple meal. Nothing fancy, just enough to quiet the growl in his stomach. Behind the counter, Emily Carter wiped down the formica surface, her apron stained with the day's spills. At 22, she was the backbone of the cafe, working double shifts to keep dreams afloat in a town that chewed up hope like gravel under tires. Her smile was genuine but tired, lines of exhaustion etching her young face. She'd seen all types, drifters with empty pockets, families scraping by, and now this biker, his boots caked in desert dust, looking like he'd ridden straight out of a ghost story. When the cook rang up the bill, $12. 47, Jacob patted his pockets, his face paling under the harsh fluorescent lights. Empty, not a dime. The humiliation burned in his chest, a fresh scar on a lifetime of them. He'd lost everything in a bad bet up north, his savings, his pride, even the old promise he'd made to a brother-in-arms years ago, to never let a man go hungry on the road. Now, here he was, defeated before the engine even cooled. Emily paused, her rag hovering mid-swipe. She glanced at the clock. 10:47 p.m. And then at Jacob's downcast eyes. The cafe was empty, save for old Mr. Wilkins in the corner booth, nursing his last coffee. Without a word, she slid a plate across the counter, burger, fries, and a slice of pie she'd meant to take home. "On the house," she said softly, her voice cutting through the hum of the ancient fridge like a lifeline. Jacob looked up, surprise flickering in his gaze, but she waved it off. "We've all been there. Eat up before it gets cold." He nodded, gratitude unspoken but profound, as he took the first bite. The flavors, greasy, comforting, stirred memories of better roads, of a crew that rode as one, bound by oaths forged in fire. Emily turned away, busying herself with closing duties, but in that moment something shifted. A promise, quiet and unbidden, took root in Jacob's soul. This act of kindness wouldn't fade into the night. As the last customer shuffled out, Emily locked the door, the bell tinkling like a farewell. Jacob finished his meal, the warmth settling in his bones, and stood to leave. But before he did, he pulled a worn leather wallet from an inner pocket, not empty after all, but holding something far more valuable than cash. A faded photo slipped out. Him and his late brother, arms slung over each other's shoulders beside a row of gleaming Harleys, the iron oath patch sewn on their vests. That promise, to protect the vulnerable, to ride for the forgotten, had pulled him through wars abroad and losses at home. Emily's gesture reignited it, a spark in the engine of his resolve. He slipped out into the cooling night, the cafe's lights dimming behind him, but his mind raced ahead. By dawn, he'd make a call that would echo through the canyons. The next morning broke with a golden haze over the horizon, the sun painting the desert in strokes of amber and rust. Emily arrived at the cafe early, her shift starting at the crack of 6 a.m. The air still crisp with the promise of another grinding day. She flipped on the lights, the familiar buzz welcoming her like an old friend. The place was quiet, save for the percolator gurgling to life. As she prepped the coffee station, a low rumble grew in the distance, like thunder rolling in from the Badlands. It swelled, vibrating the windows, until the parking lot filled with a sight that stopped her heart. A convoy of motorcycles, at least 24 strong, engines purring like predators at rest. Leather-clad riders dismounted, their vests bearing the faded emblem of the Iron Oath, an ironclad promise etched in metal and memory. Jacob led them, his face set with quiet determination. He strode through the door, the bell chiming triumphantly this time. Emily froze behind the counter, her eyes wide. You came back?" she stammered, a mix of confusion and warmth flooding her. Jacob nodded, gesturing to his crew, men and women who'd answered his midnight call, riding through the night from scattered outposts. Veterans with scars hidden under ink, mechanics who'd fixed more than bikes, all bound by the code that had saved Jacob once, and now compelled them here. "That meal last night," he said, his voice gravelly but steady, "it wasn't just food. It was a reminder of what we stand for." He placed a thick envelope on the counter, heavy with purpose. Inside, not just enough to cover her shifts for months, but a fund for the cafe itself, repairs, expansions, a future beyond scraping by. Whispers rippled through the arriving customers as the riders pitched in, rolling up sleeves to fix a leaky roof, tune the old grill, their laughter mingling with the scent of fresh brew. But it was more than money or muscle. As the morning unfolded, stories emerged around the tables, tales of lost brothers, redemptions on rain-slicked roads, the unyielding pull of loyalty. Emily listened, tears pricking her eyes, realizing this wasn't charity, it was a chain reaction of honor. Jacob's eyes met hers, a silent vow passing between them. In a world of broken trusts, one good deed could summon a thunder that reshaped everything. The cafe, once a pit stop for the weary, buzzed with new life, the rumble of engines fading only as the sun climbed higher. Yet the real ride was just beginning, for Emily, for Jacob, for the family forged in the dust and dawn. By noon, word had spread through the town like wildfire on dry grass. The young waitress who'd paid for a stranger's meal now stood at the center of a miracle, her tip not in dollars, but in unbreakable bonds. Jacob lingered at the counter, nursing a coffee, knowing the road ahead would test them all. Whispers of corruption in the local mill, owners squeezing workers dry, families on the brink, had reached his ears during the ride. Emily's own struggles, tied to a sick mother and mounting bills, mirrored the cries he'd heard before. This wasn't the end. It was the spark. As the last biker revved away, Jacob turned to her. "You gave me more than a meal yesterday. Now we ride together." The promise hung in the air, heavy as exhaust, pulling them toward shadows deeper than the desert night. The afternoon sun beat down on the Desert Rose Café like a relentless interrogator, turning the parking lot into a shimmering mirage. Emily wiped sweat from her brow, the envelope from Jacob still tucked safely in her apron pocket, its weight a strange comfort against the knot of anxiety twisting in her gut. The bikers had dispersed by midday, their engines fading into the horizon like echoes of a dream, but their presence lingered in the air. Tools scattered on the counter, fresh paint drying on the newly fixed doorframe, and the faint scent of leather and motor oil mingling with the cafe's usual aroma of frying onions. Customers trickled in, their conversations buzzing with speculation. Who were those riders? What did they want with a place like this? Emily forced a smile as she poured refills, but her mind raced back to Jacob's words. Ride together. What did that even mean for a girl like her, chained to shifts and secrets? As the lunch rush ebbed, the door chimed again, this time with the familiar squeak of worn sneakers. In walked Tommy Ruiz, Emily's co-worker and reluctant confidant, a lanky kid in his late teens with a mop of dark hair and eyes that had seen too much of the town's underbelly. He slung his backpack onto a stool, his face flushed from the heat. "Heard the commotion this morning. Bikers? In our lot? You holding out on me? Tommy had been at the cafe since high school, dodging trouble from his deadbeat dad and dreaming of escaping to the city lights. Emily shrugged, sliding him a soda on the house. Just a good deed coming back around. Nothing more. But Tommy's gaze sharpened, leaning in close. Nah, I saw that envelope, and the way that leader looked at you, like you lit a fire under him. What's the real story? Before she could deflect, the phone behind the counter jangled, its ring cutting through the hum of the ceiling fan. Emily picked it up, expecting a supplier or a delayed order. Instead, her mother's voice crackled through, frail and edged with panic. It's the hospital again. They say the treatments. We can't keep up. The bill's doubled." Emily's hand tightened on the receiver, the world narrowing to that voice. Her mum, Sarah, had been fighting a quiet battle against illness for years. Diagnoses whispered in sterile rooms, nights blurred by pain meds and false hopes. The cafe gig barely covered rent, let alone the mounting debts at the local clinic. A place more interested in paperwork than people. "I'll figure it out, Mum. Just rest," Emily murmured, hanging up with a click that echoed her resolve cracking. Tommy watched her, concern etching his features. "Bad news?" She nodded, sinking onto a stool. For the first time that day, the biker's gift felt like a bandage on a gaping wound. Not enough to heal, but a start. Word of the morning's events had rippled outward, drawing curious eyes. By late afternoon, the cafe filled with locals. Mill workers in grease-stained overalls, their faces lined from 12-hour shifts at the old lumberyard on the town's edge. The mill, once the heartbeat of the community, had fallen under new management. Slick outsiders from the city, promising jobs but delivering cuts. Wages slashed, safety ignored, families teetering on eviction. Whispers turned to murmurs as a group clustered at the corner table, voices low but heated. "Heard Harlan's crew was here," one said, a burly man named Lucas with a faded tattoo peeking from his sleeve. "Iron Oath Riders. They don't show up for tea and crumpets." Emily overheard, her ears pricking. Jacob's vest, that emblem. It wasn't just about her meal. It was a signal, a gathering storm. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the booths, Jacob returned alone, his Harley parked discreetly out back. He slid onto the same stool from the night before, the leather creaking under him. Emily approached, notepad in hand, but her questions spilled out first. "You said we ride together. What does that mean? I can't just leave." Jacob's eyes, deep-set and storm-grey, met hers steadily. He sipped the black coffee she poured, the steam rising like unspoken histories. "Doesn't mean packing a bag, means standing up. I know about the mill, heard it on the ride in. Foreman turning a blind eye to hazards, pocketing bonuses while folks like you scrape by. Reminds me of promises I made overseas, to brothers who didn't come home whole." He paused, his voice dropping. "Your kindness last night, it woke something. The oath isn't just ink, it's action, silent, but it shakes foundations." Emily leaned against the counter, the weight of it all pressing in. She'd seen the mill's toll firsthand. Tommy's uncle laid off after an accident swept under the rug, her own neighbors rationing meds. It's not that simple. The owners have pull. Local law looks the other way. Jacob nodded, pulling a small notebook from his jacket, sketches of routes and names scribbled in faded ink. "Never is. But we've faced worse. My crew's scattering now, eyes open. One call, and we're back." As he spoke, the door swung open again, admitting a shadow of a man in a cheap suit, Mr. Ellis, the mill's foreman. His face pinched with false concern, he scanned the room, eyes landing on Emily. "Carter, a word about your shifts. Things are tightening." The threat hung unspoken, a chill in the warm air. Jacob's hand stilled on his mug, tension coiling like a spring. Emily felt it too, the cafe no longer a refuge, but ground zero for something larger. Ellis droned on about cut hours, but his gaze flicked to Jacob, suspicion brewing. "Friends of yours." Emily straightened, voice firm. "Just customers." But inside, resolve hardened. As Ellis left with a curt nod, Jacob stood, placing a hand on her shoulder, a gesture brotherly, steadying. "This tip you gave me, it's multiplying. Tomorrow we talk real plans. For the mill, for your mom, for all of it." The sun set fully now, painting the windows in crimson as Emily watched him mount his bike. The engine roared to life, a promise in the thunder, pulling her toward a path she'd never imagined. Loyalty wasn't given. It was chosen, forged in the quiet hours between desperation and dawn. And now, I invite you to leave in the comments where you're watching from and the exact hour you heard this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel and at what moments they reach you. The twilight deepened over the Desert Rose Café, wrapping the building in a veil of indigo shadows that stretched like fingers across the empty highway. Emily stood at the window, her reflection ghosting against the glass, the envelope in her pocket crinkling softly with every shift of her weight. Jacob's departure had left a void, filled only by the distant hum of his Harley fading into the night, a sound that echoed the quickening beat of her heart. She locked up slowly, the keys jingling in her hand like unanswered questions, and stepped out into the cooling air. The scent of cooling asphalt and wild sagebrush clung to the breeze, a reminder that the desert held its secrets close. Just as she did hers, nights spent poring over medical bills under a single lamp, the weight of her mother's fading strength pressing down like an unseen storm. Back in her small apartment above the town's only laundromat, Emily kicked off her shoes, the floorboards creaking underfoot in protest. The place was sparse, a sagging couch, a kitchenette scarred by years of use, and walls papered with faded photos, her and Sarah as a child laughing at a county fair before the illness carved its lines into their lives. She pulled out the envelope, its contents spilling onto the coffee table. Crisp bills stacked neatly, more than she'd seen in months, alongside a handwritten note from Jacob. "For the road ahead," it read, simple words that carried the gravity of an oath. Tears blurred her vision as she dialed the hospital. The line crackling before a nurse's voice confirmed the next treatment slot. "We'll manage it," Emily said, her voice steadier than she felt. Hanging up, she stared at the money, a lifeline amid the chaos. But doubt gnawed at her. What if the mill's tightening grip squeezed this out too? Tommy's warnings echoed, layoffs looming. Whispers of unsafe machinery ignored for profit. Sleep came fitfully, broken by dreams of rumbling engines and shadowed figures until the first light of dawn filtered through threadbare curtains. Emily rose early, the air thick with the metallic tang of dew on tin roofs, and headed to the cafe. The parking lot was empty, save for a lone crow pecking at gravel, its cry sharp against the quiet. She unlocked the door, flipping switches that bathed the room in warm fluorescence, and started the coffee, its rich aroma a small anchor in the uncertainty. As the pot brewed, her thoughts turned to Jacob's notebook, the sketches of routes that hinted at deeper plans. Ride together. The words felt foreign, like borrowing someone else's courage, but the mill's shadow loomed large. Workers like Lucas, with families depending on every paycheck, deserved better than corners cut and lives risked. The morning rush brought the usual faces. Truckers with bleary eyes, sipping black coffee like it was elixir, and a few early birds from the mill, their coveralls dusted with sawdust that carried the sharp bite of pine resin. Tommy arrived on time for once, tying on his apron with a grin that didn't reach his eyes. Slept on it. Those bikers still real, Emily nodded, pouring him a mug. Real enough. And troubles brewing at the yard. Heard the foreman pushed back on safety checks again. Tommy leaned against the counter, his voice low. Uncle Rico said the same. Ladder gave out last week. Guy's legs busted, but no comp. Ellis acts like it's all in their heads. The name sent a chill through her. Mr. Ellis, with his oily smile and ledgers that balanced on the backs of the desperate. Emily's own hours had been trimmed before. One more slip, and her mom's care could unravel. By mid-morning, the door chimed with purpose, admitting a woman Emily didn't recognize. Mid-40s, with wind-tousled hair and a vest patched with the Iron Oath emblem, her boots polished but scarred from countless miles. She introduced herself as Natalie Kane, Jacob's second-in-command, her handshake firm, calloused from wrenches and road. "Heard you held the line last night," Natalie said, sliding onto a stool, her eyes scanning the room like a sentinel. Emily poured her coffee without asking, the steam curling between them. "Just standing my ground. What's next?" Natalie sipped, the mug clinking softly as she set it down. "Jacob's rallying more from the outposts. We've seen mills like this before, greed eating the soul out of places. Promises broken to the bone, but we don't storm in, we uncover, quiet rides, eyes open." As they talked, the conversation wove through layers of trust. Natalie shared fragments of her own path, a veteran nurse who'd traded scrubs for leathers after losing a patient to red tape, finding solace in the Oath's code. To mend what systems shattered. Emily opened up in turn, the words tumbling out about Sarah's quiet fight, the clinic's indifference masked as policy. "It's like they're invisible," she said, her voice cracking. Natalie's nod was understanding. No pity, just shared fire. Invisibility's their weapon, ours is the light. She slid a small device across the counter, an encrypted radio, simple as a walkie but tuned to the crew's frequency. For when it heats up, Jacob's en route with intel from a contact inside the mill. The lunch hour swelled, plates clattering, voices rising in a symphony of normalcy that belied the undercurrent. Lucas and his crew claimed their booth, their talk turning to the latest. A shipment delayed, blame shifted to workers, bonuses vanishing into thin air. Emily overheard, her pulse quickening as she refilled waters. When Ellis appeared again, striding in with his clipboard like a scepter, the air thickened. He cornered Tommy at the register, voice clipped. "Tell your shifts to watch the clock. Tightening means no slack." Tommy shot Emily a look, but she stepped forward, chin lifted. "We're all just trying to keep up, Mr. Ellis, like everyone at the yard." His eyes narrowed, flicking to Natalie, who met his gaze unflinching over her half-eaten sandwich. Tension coiled as Ellis lingered, probing with questions that skirted too close, about the bikers, the envelope, whispers of unrest. Natalie excused herself smoothly, stepping out to make a call, her silhouette framed against the blazing sun. Emily held her ground, the radio's weight in her apron, a secret talisman. As Ellis finally left, the door swinging shut with a finality that vibrated the bell, relief washed over her. But it was short-lived. Outside, dust kicked up as a familiar rumble approached, not Jacob's solo ride, but a pair of scouts from the Oath, pulling in discreetly. They nodded to Natalie, exchanging low words about a lead, falsified reports at the mill, hazards buried in paperwork. Emily watched from the window, the scene unfolding like a frame from a forgotten western, loyalty etching lines in the sand. Tommy sidled up, awe in his whisper. "This is bigger than tips, Em. You're in it now." She turned, resolve settling like dust after a storm. The afternoon stretched ahead, heavy with possibility, the cafe no longer just a job, but a crossroads. Jacob's promise echoed in her veins, pulling her from the sidelines into the ride. In the quiet moments between orders, she clipped the radio to her belt, its static a whisper of thunder yet to come. The desert wind howled softly outside, carrying the scent of change as shadows lengthened toward evening's embrace. The evening sun dipped below the jagged horizon, bleeding crimson across the sky like an open wound, as Emily wiped down the last table at the Desert Rose Café. The air inside had thickened with the day's residue, faint traces of grease from the grill, the lingering sharpness of spilled coffee, and now an undercurrent of tension that clung like humidity after a storm. The scouts from the Iron Oath had melted back into the dusk after their brief exchange with Natalie, their bikes vanishing down the highway with a low growl that vibrated through the floorboards. Tommy had clocked out early, muttering about heading home to check on his uncle, leaving Emily alone with the hum of the refrigerator and the weight of the radio clipped to her belt. Its plastic casing felt foreign against her hip, a small anchor to the unfolding unknown. She locked the front door. The bells chime a solitary echo in the emptying space, and leaned against the counter, exhaling slowly. Jacob's notebook lay open beside the register, its pages filled with cryptic notes, names of mill workers, sketches of the yard's layout, arrows pointing to shadowed corners where hazards lurked unchecked. Natalie's words replayed in her mind: uncover, quiet rides, a strategy born of patience, not fury. Emily had always navigated life by keeping her head down, serving plates and swallowing pride, but this pull toward action stirred something dormant, a quiet fire kindled by that simple meal she'd given away. Her mother's voice from the phone call earlier haunted her, frail, hopeful, trusting Emily to hold the line. For Sarah, for the cafe, for the faces at the mill who'd become more than strangers. She couldn't turn back. Outside, the parking lot stretched empty under the emerging stars, the gravel crunching softly as headlights pierced the gloom. Jacob's Harley pulled in smoothly, its engine cutting off with a decisive sigh. He dismounted, helmet tucked under his arm, his silhouette tall and unyielding against the fading light. Emily met him at the door, unlocking it with a click that seemed louder than intended. "Couldn't stay away?" she asked, stepping aside to let him in, the scent of road dust and worn leather following him like a shadow. Jacob's eyes, shadowed by the brim of his cap, scanned the room before settling on her. "Not when the pieces are moving. Natalie filled me in. Ellis is circling, and those reports. Buried deep, but not invisible." He pulled out a chair at the corner booth, the wood groaning under his weight, and gestured for her to join him. As they sat, the cafe transformed into a makeshift war room, lit by the soft glow of a single overhead lamp that cast long shadows across the checkered floor. Jacob spread the notebook open, his finger tracing a line to a circled name. Harlan Mills, the yard's parent company, owned by distant suits who'd never felt the bite of a chainsaw or the sting of sawdust in their lungs. "Got a contact inside. Old crewmate, works maintenance, says the foreman's logging false inspections, pocketing the difference. One slip and it's not just a busted leg, it's lives upended." Emily nodded, her hands folding around a mug of cooling tea she'd poured absent-mindedly. The steam had long faded, mirroring the chill settling in her chest. Lucas mentioned something similar today. A conveyor jammed last shift, nearly caught a guy. They blamed him, docked his pay. Her voice carried the raw edge of shared outrage, the moral weight of silence pressing down. Jacob leaned back, the booth's vinyl creaking, his gaze distant for a moment as memories surfaced, overseas deployments where broken gear cost more than pride, promises sworn in foxholes to watch each other's backs. The oath started like that, a vow to fix what others ignore. My brother. He taught me that. Lost him to a system that valued reports over men. The words hung heavy, unspoken grief etching his features, but he pushed on, resolve hardening. "We're not charging in. Tomorrow a few of us ride the perimeter, eyes only. You and Tommy, keep ears open here. Folks talk freer over coffee." Emily met his eyes, the radio's static crackling faintly in her pocket like a heartbeat. And if Ellis pushes harder, he's already sniffing around my shifts. Jacob's jaw tightened, a flicker of protective steel in his expression. Then we stand, together, that's the ride. Their conversation wove deeper into the night, the clock ticking past 10 as plans solidified. Discreet meetings with workers, anonymous tips to fairer ears in the county office. Emily shared more about Sarah, the quiet evenings reading old letters by her bedside, the way illness had stolen her mother's laughter but not her spirit. She always said, kindness comes back around. Guess you proved it. Jacob nodded, a rare smile cracking his weathered face. Yours did first. That meal, it was a spark in the dark. As he stood to leave, the door's bell tinkled softly, but outside, trouble brewed. A black sedan idled at the lot's edge, its tinted windows reflecting the moon like unblinking eyes. Ellis? Or worse? Jacob paused, hand on the knob, senses attuned to the night's whispers. Watch your back, Emily. This shakes foundations. Not everyone wants the quake. She watched him mount his bike, the engine roaring to life, a thunderous vow against the quiet threat of the sedan, which peeled away into the darkness moments later. Alone again, Emily dimmed the lights, the cafe's familiar contours now laced with shadows of purpose. She pocketed the notebook, its pages a map to redemption, and stepped into the night. The air was crisp, carrying the faint howl of wind through distant canyons, and overhead stars wheeled like witnesses to oaths renewed. Back in her apartment, she placed the radio on the nightstand beside a photo of Sarah, its glow a beacon in the dim room. Sleep evaded her, replaced by visions of the mill's grinding machinery, the faces of those it ground down, and the unbreakable chain linking her to Jacob's crew. Dawn would bring the next leg of the ride, tensions rising like heat from sun-baked earth, pulling her deeper into a fight for justice that felt as vast as the desert itself. The following morning unfolded with a deceptive calm, the sun rising in a blaze of gold that painted the cafe's windows in warm hues. Emily arrived early, the percolator's gurgle a steady rhythm as she prepped for the day. Tommy burst in minutes later, eyes wide with urgency. "Em, you won't believe. Overheard my uncle last night. Ellis is calling a meeting at the yard today, cutting more corners, saying it's for efficiency." His words ignited the air, the first threads of the web tightening. Emily clipped the radio tighter, its presence a silent ally. As customers filtered in, mill hands with weary steps, their coveralls bearing fresh stains, she poured coffees with purpose, listening to fragments of discontent, delayed paychecks, ignored warnings, families straining under invisible loads. Mid-morning brought Natalie back, this time with two more from the oath, silent types, mechanics by trade, their tools clinking softly as they claimed a booth under the guise of breakfast. Jacob arrived shortly after, parking out of sight, his entrance drawing no undue eyes. They huddled briefly, voices low over plates of eggs and toast, mapping the day's reconnaissance. "Perimeter ride at noon," Jacob murmured, his fork pausing mid-air. "Emily, any word from the crew here?" She relayed Tommy's intel, the group's nods grave. Lucas entered then, spotting the group, his hesitation melting into cautious trust as Natalie extended a hand. "Heard you're one of the good ones at the yard," she said simply. He slid into the booth, voice hushed. "Meeting's a trap. Pushing overtime without hazard pay. One wrong move, and it's accidents waiting." The revelation hung like smoke, moral outrage simmering beneath the surface. Emily felt it coil in her gut, the corruption, not just in ledgers, but in the betrayal of trust, promises to workers shattered for profit. As the group dispersed, Jacob lingered, his hand brushing hers in a gesture of solidarity. "This is building. Hold steady." The door chimed with his exit, but the sedan's shadow loomed in her mind, a reminder that eyes watched. By afternoon, the cafe buzzed with undercurrents, whispers turning to plans, the tip that started it all evolving into a movement. Emily stood taller behind the counter, the weight of chosen family lifting her as the desert wind outside whispered of storms to come, silent actions rippling toward a justice long overdue. If this story's gripping your heart, hit that like button to keep the ride going. The midday sun hung high over the barren stretches surrounding the mill, its heat warping the air into shimmering waves that distorted the chain-link fences and towering stacks of lumber like a fever dream. Jacob throttled his Harley down a dusty service road, the engine's rumble a low growl that blended with the wind whipping through the canyons. Flanking him were Natalie and 2 scouts from the Iron Oath, silent riders whose vests caught the light in flashes of worn chrome, their faces set like carved stone under helmets scarred by gravel and time. The perimeter ride had begun as planned, a careful loop around the yard's edges, eyes sharp for the cracks in the facade. Rusted machinery half hidden by overgrown brush, warning signs faded to illegibility, and the faint, acrid scent of oil leaks seeping into the parched earth. No charges, no banners, just observation, the quiet work of oaths that demanded truth over thunder. Back at the Desert Rose Café, Emily moved through the lunch shift with a rhythm honed by years of endurance. But today it carried an edge, like a blade sharpened in secret. The radio on her belt stayed silent, its weight a constant reminder of the ride unfolding miles away. Tommy darted between tables, trays balanced precariously, his usual banter subdued as he caught snippets of conversation from the mill hands clustered in the back. "Ellis is ramping it up," one muttered, a wiry man with grease-blackened nails nursing a water. "Pushing us on that old line, says efficiency means no breaks. My kids waiting on school supplies we can't afford." Emily refilled mugs without interrupting, her ears attuned to the undercurrents, the moral fraying of lives ground down by indifference. Sarah's face flashed in her mind, pale against hospital pillows, trusting her daughter's quiet strength, and it fueled the fire, turning service into surveillance. The door chimed sharply around 1 o'clock, admitting Mr. Ellis in a swirl of hot air, his suit rumpled and tie askew, clipboard clutched like a shield. He scanned the room with predatory focus, zeroing in on Emily at the counter. "Carter!" he barked, voice slicing through the din of clattering silverware. "A moment!" She wiped her hands on her apron, heart steadying as she approached, the radio's clip pressing into her side like a whispered vow. Ellis leaned in close, his cologne cloying against the cafe's earthy scents. "Heard rumors. Bikers sniffing around, stirring talk. You wouldn't know anything about that, would you? This town's got enough trouble without outsiders meddling." His eyes bored into hers, probing for weakness, but Emily held his gaze, the kindness she'd extended to Jacob now a shield of her own. "Just serving folks who need it, Mr. Ellis, like always." He snorted, tapping his clipboard. "Watch your associations. Shifts are tight. One wrong word, and yours could vanish. Tell that to your little crew here." Tommy hovered nearby, pretending to bus a table, his jaw clenched. As Ellis turned to leave, the radio crackled to life in Emily's pocket, faint but urgent, Natalie's voice, clipped and low. Eyes on the east fence, machinery's a hazard, leaks everywhere, no barriers. Ellis's truck just pulled up inside. Emily's pulse quickened, the pieces aligning like gears in the mill's shadowed heart. She slipped into the kitchen, the door swinging shut behind her, and pressed the device to her ear. "Copy. He's here now, at the cafe, pressing hard." The line hissed with static, then Jacob's gravelly tone. "Stay clear. We're documenting. Truth's our weapon." Hanging up felt like releasing a breath held too long, but the encounter with Ellis left a chill, his parting glare a promise of retaliation. Out on the perimeter, the ride intensified as the group crested a rise overlooking the yard. Below, the mill sprawled like a wounded beast, Conveyors groaning under loads of timber, sparks flying from welders ignoring safety protocols, workers darting like shadows amid the chaos. Jacob signaled a halt, engines idling to a purr as they dismounted behind a cluster of mesquite trees, their branches casting dappled shade. Natalie pulled out a compact camera, its lens glinting as she snapped shots, a forklift teetering on unstable ground, fuel drums stacked precariously near open flames, the air thick with the metallic tang of neglect. "This isn't oversight," she murmured, zooming in on Ellis's truck parked by the office. The foreman gesturing animatedly to a cluster of suited figures, likely the city owners, their faces obscured by distance, but postures screaming entitlement. Jacob nodded, his own phone capturing video, the device's shutter, a soft click against the wind's howl. Memories stirred. Of foxholes where ignored warnings cost lives, of a brother's last letter swearing vengeance on systems that betrayed the faithful. One scout, a broad-shouldered veteran named Ryan, with ink tracing veins like road maps, pointed to a side gate where workers unloaded crates. "See that? No harnesses on the lifts. One gust, and it's over." The words hung heavy, echoing the cafe's whispers, the shared thread of vulnerability pulling the oath tighter. They remounted, circling wider to avoid patrols, the desert's vastness amplifying their isolation. But as they looped back, a security truck emerged from the yard, tires kicking up dust plumes that choked the air. It veered toward their path, lights flashing in warning. Jacob gunned the engine, leading the evasion into a dry wash, the bikes bouncing over ruts as the truck pursued. Its siren a shrill wail cutting the silence. Branches whipped at their faces, the scent of sage and sweat mingling, hearts pounding in sync with the roar. They lost it in a maze of arroyos, emerging miles later, breathless but unbroken, data secured like contraband gold. By late afternoon, the convoy regrouped at a nondescript diner 20 miles out, the air inside cool with the hum of ancient AC units. Jacob spread the photos on a scarred table, the group huddled close over cooling sodas. "This proves it. Falsified logs, dangers buried. We'll route it to the county inspector, anonymous. No names, just facts." Natalie traced a hazard on the map, her voice steady. "Emily's feed was key. Ellis is rattled, means we're close." Ryan leaned in, adding details from his vantage. Worker morale crumbling. Quiet talks of walkouts suppressed. The oath's code pulsed through them, redemption not in revenge, but in restoring balance, honoring the forgotten with actions that echoed louder than words. Emily, back at the cafe as the sun slanted golden through the windows, felt the shift when Jacob's text buzzed her phone. "Ride successful, intel solid, meet at dusk, plans for the push." Relief washed over her, mingling with resolve, as Tommy clocked out, clapping her shoulder. "Whatever this is, Em, it's right." The last customers trickled away, leaving the space echoing with possibility. She stepped outside as twilight crept in, the horizon bruising purple, the faint rumble of approaching bikes stirring the dust. Jacob pulled up first, Natalie behind, their faces etched with the day's grit, but eyes alight with purpose. "Your spark started this," Jacob said, dismounting. "Now, we turn the tide." Emily nodded, the family chosen in leather and loyalty drawing her in, the mill's shadows retreating before the gathering storm. But in the distance, Ellis's sedan idled again, a silent sentinel, hinting at the confrontation brewing just beyond the fading light. The ride pressed on, promises forging paths through the encroaching dark. The encroaching dark swallowed the highway's edges, turning the desert into a canvas of velvet shadows, pierced only by the twin beams of Jacob's headlight. Emily stood in the cafe's doorway, the cool evening breeze tugging at her apron strings, carrying the faint metallic whisper of distant rain. The rumble of arriving bikes grew from a murmur to a symphony, engines cutting off one by one as Natalie and the scouts dismounted, their silhouettes emerging like guardians from the gloom. Dust settled slowly around their boots, the air thick with the scent of heated rubber and sun-baked earth. Jacob swung off his Harley, his face illuminated briefly by the cafe's porch light, lines of determination etched deeper than before. "We've got the proof," he said, voice low and steady, pulling a slim drive from his jacket pocket. "Photos, video, enough to crack the facade without a single raised fist." Inside, the group gathered around the counter, the space transformed once more into a sanctuary of resolve. Emily poured coffees, the steam rising like fragile hopes, while Tommy lingered in the shadows, his eyes wide with the gravity of it all. Natalie spread the printed images across the formica, blurry but damning shots of rusted gears grinding without guards, fuel spills pooling unchecked, workers balanced on scaffolds that swayed like promises about to break. Lucas had joined them quietly, slipping in through the back after his shift, his coveralls still dusted with the mill's residue, the sharp tang of lumber clinging to him. This could change everything," he murmured, tracing a finger over a photo of the east fence, where the leaks they'd spotted now stood exposed in stark black and white. Emily felt the weight of their shared gaze, the quiet power of truths unearthed, binding them tighter than blood ever could. As the clock ticked toward midnight, plans unfolded with the precision of a well-oiled machine. Jacob outlined the next move: anonymous delivery to the county's ethics board, routed through a trusted contact, a retired judge who'd once ridden with the oath, his sense of justice unbent by years off the bench. "No names on the oath side," Jacob emphasized, his eyes meeting Emily's across the table. "We shine the light, let it do the burning." Natalie nodded, her voice a calm anchor. "Ellis's sedan was tailing us on the loop. He's spooked, but fear makes men sloppy." Tommy shifted uncomfortably, glancing at the darkened windows. "What if he comes here, cuts us all off before it lands?" The question hung, a thread of vulnerability. But Lucas leaned forward, his burly frame steady. "Then we stand, like family does. My crew's ready. Whispers in the yard are turning to resolve." The night deepened, the cafe's lights dimming to a soft glow as they dispersed in pairs, shadows melting into the black. Emily walked Jacob to his bike, the gravel crunching underfoot, stars wheeling overhead like silent witnesses. "You pulled me into this," she said softly, the envelope's memory a warm echo in her pocket. "But it's ours now." He paused, helmet in hand, the leather of his vest creaking as he turned. Memories flickered in his eyes. Of his brother, lost to a similar web of neglect overseas, the promise sworn at graveside to fight the unseen wars back home. "Kindness like yours, it's the spark that redeems us all." His engine roared to life, a thunderous farewell as he rode into the dark, taillight fading like a comet's trail. Dawn broke with a hesitant light, painting the horizon in pale pinks and golds, the desert awakening with the chirp of hidden birds and the distant low of waking semis. Emily opened the cafe early, the familiar routine a balm against the night's tension, wiping counters slick with dew-kissed condensation, the coffee's rich aroma chasing away the chill. Customers arrived in trickles, their faces bearing the mill's fresh weariness. But today, the air hummed with something new, furtive nods, lowered voices carrying hope instead of despair. Tommy arrived with news, breathless from a pre-dawn call. "Word's out. Inspectors showed at the yard an hour ago. Ellis is scrambling, yelling into his phone like a cornered coyote." By mid-morning, the pieces converged. Natalie slipped in quietly, her vest hidden under a jacket, sliding onto a stool with a nod. Package landed, boards moving fast, unannounced audit. Emily's heart lifted, the radio finally silent on her belt, its purpose served. But the door burst open then, admitting Ellis in a storm of agitation, his suit disheveled, face flushed redder than the rising sun. He stormed to the counter, clipboard forgotten, eyes wild. "You! This is your doing! Those biker pests stirring the pot!" His voice cracked, accusations spilling like spilled oil, but the cafe had filled with witnesses. Lucas and his crew at the booths. Tommy frozen mid-pour. Even old Mr. Wilkins, looking up from his paper with uncharacteristic steel. Emily stood firm, hands steady on the counter's edge, the scent of fresh brew grounding her. "Just serving coffee, Mr. Ellis, but truth has a way of riding in." He lunged forward, words tumbling, threats of firings, lawsuits, the mill's iron grip. But the door chimed again, admitting two county officials in crisp uniforms, badges glinting under the fluorescence. "Mr. Ellis, a word outside. We've got questions about those reports." The foreman's bluster deflated, his shoulders slumping as he was led away, the click of the door sealing his retreat. Whispers erupted, relief rippling through the room like a collective exhale. The moral tide turning without a drop of blood. News spread through the day like sunlight piercing clouds. The audit uncovered it all. Falsified logs, skimmed funds, hazards that had endangered lives for profit. By afternoon, the owners from the city were scrambling, announcements of reforms echoing from the yard, safety overhauls, back pay, protections etched into new policies. Lucas clapped Emily on the back as his crew celebrated with extra slices of pie, their laughter filling the space once heavy with defeat. Tommy grinned, the weight lifting from his young shoulders. "You did this, Em. All from one meal." As evening fell, Jacob returned, the full crew assembling in the parking lot under a sky streaked with sunset's fire. Engines idled softly, a chorus of loyalty, as he approached Emily. "The board's closing the loop. Ellis out, real changes in. Your mom's treatments? We've got a fund rolling quiet-like." Tears pricked her eyes, the envelope's gift multiplying into a legacy of care. Sarah's voice from an earlier call echoed, grateful, stronger already. Natalie hugged her briefly, the embrace sisterly, while Ryan and the scouts raised fists in salute. This was the family chosen, forged in dust and dawn, honoring promises that outlasted storms. Jacob lingered last, mounting his bike as the convoy prepared to ride. "The road goes on," he said, voice gravelly with emotion. "But you've got a place with us, any time." Emily watched them go, the thunder fading into harmonious echoes, the cafe's lights a beacon against the night. In the quiet aftermath she locked up, the bells chime a note of triumph, the desert wind whispered through, carrying scents of sage and renewal as stars emerged overhead. Redemption wasn't a destination, it was the ride itself, silent sacrifices blooming into justice, one act of honor at a time. The desert rose stood taller, its roots deepened by unbreakable bonds, a testament to the power of standing true. Thank you for riding along on this journey of loyalty and heart. If these stories of quiet courage resonate with you, subscribe for more chapters of redemption on the open road.